In this video, we're going to look at what is Python and how does it relate to QGIS and AEC. Well, first of all, Python is a way to create macros and plugins, especially within QGIS. It's a script language for automating tasks, such as loading data, running analysis, even calculating areas. Python does not get compiled. It stays as a text file. You can open it up in Notepad. For example, mypython.py is a text file that you can open up. It never gets compiled. It's always readable. It's very unique in that it uses spaces to understand looping and logic and if statements. It uses spaces and tabs. And that's how you know if something's inside of a logic loop or not, with a space. Now, Python is usually bundled with QGIS. That means you can run Python after QGIS is installed. Sometimes it's good to review your packages that are being installed when you use the advanced install with QGIS. So don't install the standalone QGIS package if you're planning to use Python. Use the advanced one and make sure that all the Python libraries are being installed when you do that. Here's some example Python code. The message, that's a variable, equals hello world. And then if we want to print that message to the screen, you put print, 2 round parentheses, and the message, and the hello world appears. Or if you want to calculate kilometers to miles, you can have a variable called kilometers, say 100. The factor can equal 0.62137. And the miles would be the kilometers times the factor. And then you print that miles to the screen, and you'll see 62.14, in that case, miles. Python also has functions. These functions you can call at any time, over and over again. That's the nice thing about functions. You can call a function many times, and you can call it anywhere you want. So first of all, how do you define a function? Well, to define a function, you put the little def, D-E-F, and then the name of the function. In this case, I'm calling it getMiles. And you need to pass something to get miles. In this case, I'm passing it the kilometers. Then I create a factor, 0.62137, and then I calculate the miles from the kilometers someone passed to the function, multiply it by the factor, and then I print the miles to the screen. For example, I can now run getMiles by saying getMiles pass 100. Now you notice that the getMiles 100 is now aligned with the DEF. That means that function's over. The function is defined by everything after the colon at the top and everything that's indented. Once the indenting stops, that's the end of the function. That's a really unique thing inside of Python. Now for looping, it's the same thing. So for example, I'm saying loop over x from a range of 10 to 20. Now, when I say that, loop over x from a range of 10 to 20, so x becomes 10, 11, 12, and so on. I have a colon at the end, and then everything indented after the colon are inside that loop. But then I have another line in there. It says, now if x is greater than 16, do something. So then I have another colon and another indent. So therefore, everything after the if statement is indented again. So therefore, we have 2 indents that represent 1, the loop, and 2, the if statement. So in the end, as I loop over from 10 to 19, that's how that works, 10 to 19, if x happens to be greater than 16, it'll print it to the screen. And guess what happens? I get 17, 18, and 19 in this. So that's how unique Python is with these indents. And for the functions, you can see everything after the colon is indented there, or in the for loop or if statements, everything after the colon are indented there as well. That's just very unique with Python. Now, how do I use Python with QGIS? Well, here's a little gotcha, and I want to talk about this right now. When you first install QGIS, you may want to check this out. This is in your system properties, and it's called an environment variable. And it's a system variable that gets installed when you first install QGIS. It's the Python path. This Python path is a list of directories to look for Python code and libraries. Now, normally you'd see things like the first 2 lines in the environment variable, such as the Python 37 and the Python 37 lib. Those are the 2 first ones. But I had to actually add manually, when I first installed QGIS, I had to add the apps QGIS Python, and I had to add the apps QGIS Python plugins. Those two didn't exist. And in fact, I don't think I even had the site packages. So I had to put the Python 37 lib site packages. Be very careful here that your environment variables are all populated. And check this out before you begin this course, that your environment variables have been set up after installing QGIS. Now remember, these are all set up on Windows, and it may be very different on your Mac or your Linux box. Now, you can definitely test if this is all set up correctly. All you have to do is run a command line and type the word Python. That should fire up Python right away. So for example, I open up a command prompt, a CMD, inside of Windows, and I type the word Python. Right away, it says I'm using Python 3.7.0. And it tells me things like you can type help or copyright and so on. Now, the real test here is one line. You just have to type import qgis.core. If you can type that and you get no errors, then everything is set up well. That means the QGIS core libraries are now available to that version of Python. You're good to go. And this is a great test to make sure Python is up and running. So you saw how to use basic Python code, but now we're just looking at some of the setup to make sure we can do more advanced Python where we actually talked to QGIS. What about AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction? Now, normally, those fields use Revit files and DWGs and civil drawings, but for QGIS, we're going to really focus on DWG and DXF. In fact, DXF is the way to get data in and out of QGIS right now. We will have a video on importing DWGs, but from a Python perspective, DXF is where it's at. So we're going to focus on DWG and DXF import and export, but we're going to learn about adding layers and working with layer definitions with Python with shapefiles first. So don't get discouraged if some of the earlier videos show us using Python and shape data. We'll eventually get to the DWG and DXF soon. And all that knowledge you learn about loading shapefiles will work with your DWG DXF. So PY QGIS is ready to go. And often you'll see PY for Python, QGIS, referred to because they're bundled together.